Today's what is today? February. Oh, look at 222, February 22. So okay, 2019. We are continuing the book called "The Life with David Through the Sun" by Alexander Maclaren. It right now in 14th chapter. The title is "The Chastisements." Is that the one we start with? Am I right? So okay. So the chastisements, which were the natural fruits of David's sin, soon began to show themselves. And though apparently 10 years elapsed to pass before Absalom's revolt, and which time he was probably a man of 60, but these 10 years were weary and sad. There is no more joyous activity, no more conquering energy, no more consciousness of his people's love. Disaster thickens round him and may all be traced to his great sin. His children learned the lesson he had taught them at the last, and what the word? Fratricide? Fratricide?
I think so.
What that means?
The crime of murdering your own brother or sister.
Oh, fratricide desolated his family. A parent can have no sharper palm than the sight of his own sins reappearing in his child. David saw the ghastly reflections of unbridled passion in his elderly son's full crime, and even a gleam of it in his unhappy daughter, and his murderous craft in the second son's bloody revenge. Whilst all this hell of crime is boiling round him, a strange passiveness seemed to have crept over the king, and have continued till his flight before Absalom. The narrative is singularly silent about him. He seems paralyzed by the consciousness of his past sin. He originates nothing. He dares not punish Ammon. He can only weep when he hears of Absalom's crime. He weakly longs for the return of the lantern from his exile, but cannot nerve himself to send for him till Joab urged it. The flash is old kingliness blazed out for a moment in his refusal to see the sun, but even and the slight satisfaction to justice vanishes as soon as Joab chooses to insist that Absalom shall return to court. He seems to have no will of his own. He has become a mere tool in the hands of the fierce general, and Joab's hold upon him was his complicity in Uriah's murder. Thus, at every step he was dogged by the consequences of his crime, even though it was pardoned sin. And if, as is probable, Ahithophel was Bathsheba's grandfather, the most formidable person in Absalom's conspiracy, whose defection wounded him so deeply, was no doubt driven to the usurper's side out of revenge for the insult to his horse in her person. Thus, of our pleasant vices does heaven make wish to scourge us. Be not deceived. It's 222 now. 222 and February 22. That's pretty good, huh? Yeah. Be not deceived. Whatsoever a man sows, that shall he also reap. It's not probable that many psalms were made in these very days, but the 41st and 55th are, with reasonable probability, referred to this period by many commentators. They give a very touching picture of the old king during the 4 years in which Absalom's conspiracy was being hatched. It seems from the 41st that the pain and the sorrow of his heart. And, somebody told me to do two and to do two. That's your mom, actually. Can you read that? Okay, that's nice. Anyway, back to the reading. Where? The giver. I'm sorry. It seems from the 41st that the pain, the sorrow of his heart, and brought on some serious illness, which his enemies had used for their own purposes and embittered by hypocritical condolences and ill-concealed glee. The sensitive nature of the psalmist winced under the heartless desertion of him and pours out its plaint in this pathetic lament. It begins with a blessing on those who consider the afflicted, having reference remember to the few who are faithful to him in his languishing sickness. He passes then to his own case, and after humble confession of the sin, almost in the words of the 51st Psalm, he tells how his sick bed, and being surrounded by very different visitors, his disease draw no pity, but only fierce impatience that lingered in life so long. My enemies speak evil of me. When will he die, and the name have perished? One of them, in especial, who must have been a man in high position to gain access to the sick chamber, has been conspicuous by his lying words of condolence. If he come to see me, he speaks vanity. The sight of the sick king touches no chord of affection, but only increases the treacher's animosity. His heart gathered evil to itself, and then having watched his pale face, who wished for unfavorable symptoms, the false friend hurried from the bedside to talk of his hopeless illness. He goeth abroad, he telleth it, the tidings spread, that stealthily passed from one conspirator to another. All that hate me whisper together against me. They exaggerate the gravity of his condition, and are glad because, making the wish the father to the thought, they believe him dying a thing of Belial, that is, a destructive disease. Say they, is poured out upon him, and now that he lieth, he shall rise up no more. And the sharpest upon of all that among these traitors, and probably the same person as he whose heartless presence in the sick chamber was so hard to bear, should be Ahithophel, whose counsel had been like an oracle from God. Even he, the man of my friendship, in whom I trusted, which did eat my bread, he like a ignoble, vicious mule, had lifted high his heel against the sick line. We shall be disposed to refer the 39th Psalm also to this period. It too is the meditation of one in sickness, which he knows to be a divine judgment for his sin. There's a little trace of enemies in it, but his attitude is that of a silent submission, while a weakened man are disquieted around him, which is precisely the characteristic peculiarities of his conduct and spirit. It consists of two parts, verse 1 to 6 and 7 to 13, both which the subject of his meditations are the same, but the tune of them different. His own sickness and mortality, and man's fleeting, shadowy life are his themes. The former had led him to think of the lantern. The first effect of his sorrow was to close lips in a silence that was not altogether submission. I held my peace, even from good, and my sorrow was stirred. As in his sin, when he kept silence, his bones waxed old. So now in his sorrow and the sickness, the pain that I could not find expression raised more violently. The tearless eyes were hard and aching, but he conquered the down spirit that could carry the heavy thoughts to God. They were heavy and first. He only desired that the sad truth may be driven deeper into his soul, with the engrossment so characteristic for melancholy, he asked what might have been so the thing he needed least, make me to know my end. And then he dilated on the gloomy reflections which he had been cherishing in silence. Not only he himself, with his handbreadth days, had shrunk into absolute nothingness when brought into contrast with the life gone, but that every man, even when apparently standing most firm, is only a breath. A breath or breath? Breath. As a shadowing, every man moves spectral among shadows. The tumult that fills their lives is madness. Only from the breath are they disquieted, so bitterly with anticipation of the sad, clear-eyed pity and scorn of the preacher. Does the sick and the wearied king speak? In tunes were unlike the joyful music of his early utterances. But the true and the wholesome as such thoughts are, they are not all the truth. So the prayer changes in tune, even while its substance is the same. It rises from the shows of earth to its true home, driven thither by their hollowness. My hope is in thee. The conviction of earth's vanity is all different when it has told him to thine breast. The pardoned sinner, who never thereafter forgot his grievous foe, asks for deliverance from all his transgressions. The sullen silence, and change into full acquiescence, I open not my mouth, because thou didst it. A silence differing from the other as the calm after the storm, when all the winds sleep and the sun shines out on a freshened world, differ from the boding stillness, while the slow sun clouds glow lurid on the horizon. Is that a word called lurid?
Mm-hmm.
He cried for healing, for he knows his sickness to be the buffet and the sword of God's hand, and his bitterness is assuaged, even while its force continues by the conviction that it is God's fatherly chastisement for sin which gnaws away his manly vigor as the moth frets his kingly robe. The very thought, which has been so bitter that every man his vanity, reappears in a new connection, and the basis of the prayer that God would hear. It is modified so as to become infinitely blessed and hopeful. I am a stranger with thee, and a sojourner, as all my fathers were, a wanderer indeed, and a transient guest on earth. But what of that? If he be God's guest, all that is sorrowful is drawn away when we realized our connection with God. We're in God's house. The host, not the guest, is responsible for the housekeeping. We need not feel life lonely if He be with us, nor its shortness end. It's not a shadow, a dream, a breath, if it be rooted in him. And thus the sick man has conquered his gloomy thoughts, even though he sees a little before him, but the end. It is not cast down, even though his desires are all summed up in one for a little respite and healing. Ere the brief trouble of earth be done to be done with. Oh, spare me, that I may recover strength before I go hence and be no more. It may be observed that this supposition of protracted illness, which is based upon these psalms, throws light upon the singular passiveness of David during the maturing of Absalom's conspiracy, and may naturally be supposed to have favored his schemes, essential part of which was to ingratiate himself with the suitors who came to the king for judgment, by affecting great regret that no man would dispute it of the king to hear them. The accumulation of untried causes and the apparent disorganization of the judicial machinery are well accounted for by David's sickness. The 55th Psalm gives some very pathetic additional particulars. It is in 3 parts: a plaintive prayer and portraiture of the psalmist's mental distress, verse 1 to 8, a vehement supplication against his foes, an indignant recounting of the treachery, verses 9 to 16, and finally a prophecy of the retribution that is to fall upon them, verses 17 to 23. In the first and second portions, we have some points which help to complete our picture of the man. For instance, his heart writhes within him. The terrors of death are on him. Fear and trembling are come on him, and horror has covered him. All these points, like subsequent verses, to his knowledge of the conspiracy before it came to a head, the state of the city, which is practically in the hands of Absalom and his tools, is described with bold imagery. Violence and strife in possession of it, spies prowling about the walls day and night, evil and trouble in its midst, and destruction, oppression, and deceit, goodly company floating in its open spaces, and the spirit, the brain of the whole, is the trusted friend whom he made his own equal. He had shared his secretest thoughts in private, and walked next to him in solemn procession to the temple. Seeing all this, what does the king do, who was once so fertile in what's the word? Fertile?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in resource, so decisive in counsel, so prompt in action? Nothing. His only weapon is prayer. As for me, I will call upon God, and the Lord will save me. Evening, morning, and noon will I pray and cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice. The Lord grew as it list, and only longed to be out of all the very call of troubles. All that I had wings like a dove, then would fly away and be in the rest. Lo, on the flee far off, I would lodge in the wilderness. I would swiftly fly to my refuge from the raging wind, from the tempest. The legor of his disease. Love is a worthless sum, consciousness sin, a submission to the chastisement through one of his own horse, which Nathan had foretold, keep him quiet, though he saw the plot winding its meshes round him, and in the submission, patience, confidence not wanting, though subdued, and saddened, which finds expression in the last verse, the psalm of the heavy laden cast our burden upon Jehovah. He will sustain thee. I will trust in thee. I'm going to read that psalm, Psalm 55. Interesting psalm. I don't know if the interpretation here is right or not. Anyways, so let's read that psalm. Psalm 55. Psalm 55 for the directed music with the string instruments, a muscular David. Today I will do some reading a little bit, okay? So, I mean, this part of the story. So, listen to my prayer, O God. Do not ignore my plea. Hear me and answer me. My thoughts trouble me, and I am distraught. At the voice of the enemy, at the stares of the wicked. For they bring down suffering upon me and revile me in the anger. My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death assail me. Fear and trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me. I said, oh, that I had the wings of the dove, and to fly away and be the rest. Or to flee far away and to stay in the desert. I would have hurried to my place of shelter, far from the tempest storm. Confuse the wicked, O Lord, confound their speeches, for I see violence and strife in the city. Day and night they prowl about on its walls, malice and abuse are within it. Destructive forces at work in the city, threats, lies, never leave the streets. If an enemy were insulting me, I could endure it. If a foe were raising himself against me, I would hide from him. But it's you, a man like myself, my companion, my close friend, with whom I once enjoyed the sweet fellowship, as we walked with the throng and the halls of God. Let death take my enemies by surprise. Let them go down alike to the grave, for evil finds lodging among them. But I called to God, and the Lord saved me. Evening, morning, noon, I cried out in distress, and He hears my voice. He ransoms me unharmed from the battle waged against me. Even though many oppose me, God, who is enthroned forever, will hear them and afflict them. Men who never change their ways and have no fear of God. My companion attacks his friends. He violates his covenant. His speech is smooth as butter, yet war is in his heart. His word is more soothing than oil, yet they are drawn swords. Cast your cares on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never let the righteous fall, but you, O God, will bring down the wicked into the pit of corruption. Bloodthirsty and deceitful men will not live out half their days. But as for me, I trust in you. That is a very intense psalm, huh? Continue the reading. When the blue and the last fell, the same passive acquiescence in what it felt to be God's chastisement is were noticeable. Absalom escaped to Hebron, and set up the standard of a revolt. When the news comes to Jerusalem, the king's only thought is immediate flight. He's almost cowardly in his eagerness to escape, and is prepared to give up everything without a blow. It seems as if only a touch was needed to overthrow his throne. He hurries on the preparations for flight with nervous haste. He forms no plans beyond those of his earlier wish to fly away and be in rest. He tried to denude himself of followers when the 600 men of Gath, who had been with him ever since his early days in Philistia, had grown grey in his service, make themselves a van of his little army. He urged the heroic Itaiah, the leader, Itaiah, I think, the leader, to leave him a fugitive, to worship the rising sun, return to that place, and bide with the king. So sorely does he regard the crowns of pans already from his brows. The priest with the ark was sent back. He is not worthy to have the symbol of the divine presence identified with his doubtful course, and is prepared to submit without a murmur if God said, I have no delight in thee. With covered head and naked feet, it goes up the slope of Olivet, and turning pampers and that same bend in the rocky mountain path was the true king coming to the city, wept as he saw his shining walls and soaring pinnacles across the narrow valley. The discrowned king and all his followers broke into passionate weeping, and they gazed their last and the lost captive, and then with choking sobs rounded the shoulder of the hill, and set their faces to their forlorn flight, passing through the territory of a Saul tribe, dangerous ground for him to tread. The rank hatred of Shemaiah's heart blossoms into speech. With the eastern vehemence, he curses the flame stones, the dust in the transports is a fury, stumbling along among the rocks high up on the side of the glen, as he keeps abreast of the little band below. Did David remember Hall, the husband from whom he had torn Michal, and followed her to this weird place, and there and turned back weeping to the lonely home? The remembrance and rate of later more evil deeds prompted his meek answer, let him curse, for the Lord and bidding him. The first forced disaster spent itself by the time he was safe across Jordan on the free uplands of Bashan. His spirit rises. He makes a stand on Mahanaim, the place where his great ancestor in circumstances somewhat analogous. Huh? That's word?
Analogous? I don't know.
Analogous? Okay. That's strange.
I would pronounce it analogous.
Analogous, okay, to his own. As seeing the vision of bright harnessed angels racked in battle array for the defense of himself. That is Tom Jacob, okay? So, and his own little band, and called the name of the place the Two Cans. Pampers and old story helped to hearten him, and defection of Ahithophel from the conspiracy certainly would do. As the time went on too, it became increasingly obvious that the leaders of the rebellion were infirm of purpose, and that every day of respite from actual fighting diminished their chances of success. So then the political advisor saw so plainly that his grandfather of Bathsheba, actually, right? So the grandfather of Solomon, can you believe that? So become a counselor and supporter for Absalom. So when Absalom did a wrong thing, here's a wrong counselor, he was so disheartened, he killed himself. You remember the story? So that's what I'm talking about. Whatever may have been the reason, it's clear that by the time David has reached Mahanaim, he had resolved not to yield without a struggle. He girded on his sword once more, with some of the animation of the early days. Light, trustful vigor of valor blazed again in his old eyes. Let me just add some comments to this, so for your information. You understand there was a huge gap between, age gap between the sons, Absalom, Solomon, and others. Am I right? For example, when Solomon just became king, he's about 20 years, 22, 20 some years old. So now at that time, David evidently was over 60, so something like that. More than 60, maybe 70 years old. Who knows? I don't know exactly how old he died. But Absalom was an older son, so there must be 20 years at least the gap between them. Am I right? And that's my point. So now you can imagine in a kingdom you have different princes. Am I right? This age with an aging king, with David as the father. Then the different princes gonna fight for the continuation, basically who gonna be the next king. Am I right? So as the young ones would never consider what to be in the good position to be considered as the heir for the kingdom. Am I right? So even this character Ahithophel, I think, is his grandfather for Solomon. Due to the family reasons that we due to an eminent place, am I have such influence over the kingdom. Yet he don't consider his youngest grandson, little boy, basically, am I, is going to be the next heir. So he threw himself into the alliance with Absalom, who was powerful, overtaking Absalom, almost take over the court judgment when David is yield. So there's a conspiracy going on, basically. The sons try to alliance with their whatever the way to try to take over the kingdom, basically. So at this point, Absalom have a Joab support, have the priest support, I believe. So this grandfather also lent his support, the conspired.
Wow.
Absalom declared to be king, basically. So making sense here. So that's the story goes. At that time, David was a young boy. So actually, your age maybe. David was young, so young that he.
You mean Solomon?
I'm sorry, Solomon. Yeah, Solomon was young, am I right? So
yeah.
I don't think it was that old. So if I'm making sense to you, so
that's true. I think around my age. I think around.
Yeah. After 10 some years, the grandfather gained eminence in the kingdom. It's an alliance with Absalom, because can you believe that? So that where David's trouble comes, all his elder son turn against him. Is that amazing? I mean, they're not good sons. So my point is that read the history. The biblical history is a narrative of more about God dealing with particular his purposes. Dealing with David. But you can look at the bigger picture, how the politics, how the history happened, right? So then give a more general picture, a more rich, vivid picture of how David acted, how the old son, how Solomon acted with them, right? So all those characters in the course, in the kingdom, and reacted to the process. It's interesting to say. This third person with mentioned, the grandfather, is a contrast with Zadok, the priest, who later on actually known as Solomon. So with that, you pray for us, wrap it up. So.
Lord, we thank you for this time. Lord, the example that you continue to show us.
And Nathan. By the way, Nathan as well. So Nathan is another camp for represent the righteous priest, righteous spiritual leader, like a prophet. And that's my point. So there's a huge division in the kingdom. So go ahead.
Lord, we thank you for the example that you continue to show us, Lord, through the life of David. Lord, the good examples, Lord, the spiritual examples in his life, Lord, but also the carnal, Lord, tendency and way of man, Lord, through even his own self, Lord, and those around him. Lord, I pray that through this example, Lord, this story of his life, Lord,
Absalom and this leaders, the prophets, whatever, is actually the spirit of the Antichrist, a picture of the prophetic Antichrist spirit.
Yep.
Speaking Revelation, talking about the beast's gonna have its false prophets and rise like that. You remember that? So yeah. Anyways, so, go ahead.
Lord, I pray that we would receive discernment from this, Lord, to see these same, Lord, entities and spirits, Lord, within, Lord, the midst of your people, Lord, as they directly oppose your way and your purpose. Lord, I pray that truly we would have the wisdom and discernment, Lord, and understanding to see them, Lord, and the wisdom and power to act against and upon them. Lord, especially in our midst, Lord, within our own selves. Lord, I pray that there would be protection, Lord, and a hedge around our hearts, our minds, our spirits, Lord, and our souls. Lord, and what greater protection could they have, Lord, to, if they were given to you, Lord, fully to you, and not, Lord, protected, Lord, held by our own selves, but Lord, governed by you and your spirit. So Lord, I pray that, Lord, all of your people would have the desire to do this. Lord, the desire to have you, Lord, in complete, Lord, governance and control, Lord, of their lives. Lord, I pray that you would bless it. Lord, that you would speak to your people. Lord, that they would listen to you. I pray these things in Jesus' name.
In Jesus'
Amen.
name.